Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. The ending of TOTEN marks the end of the Aether storyline, and today I'm going to explain exactly what it all means and why it had to be this way. We're going to stay pretty focused on just the ending today, and in a separate video I'll explain every single other detail about the story of the map as a whole, like Pablo and Yena, the Shadow Man, cloning, and more. Today though, let's play the first part of the ending and go from there.
Comrades, as we toast our victory, I want each of you to think about what you really want. Where would you like to go now? Believe me, you can have it.
So the characters are celebrating in the forest. To make sure you're up to speed, let's take a quick look back at how they got there and what they're planning to do. In Blood of the Dead, Primus broke free from the Black Ops 3 cycle for the first time. Primus Richtofen made the ultimate sacrifice and stepped into the dark mechanism, and Primus Nikolai was made the new leader of the crew. It's at this point that Nikolai was able to read the Chronorium and learn of the new future that he and his friends would need to fight for if they wanted to save the universe from the corrupting influence of the dark ether. He learned that Dr. Monty, just like the Shadow Man, was not actually someone they could trust, and in fact he too had been corrupted by the dark ether. So with his newly formed plan after reading the Chronorium, he took the remaining Primus crew to Classified to meet up with Ultimus. Prior to the arrival of Primus, the Ultimus characters had just returned from the moon, and Ultimus Richtofen had been left catatonic and empty. Thankfully, following the events of the Zombies comics, Zombie Richtofen was able to return to Ultimus Richtofen and gave him his remaining life force, reviving his human self, but temporarily destroying his zombie self in the process. A soul for a soul, if you will. This is when Primus arrived from Blood of the Dead, and Nikolai proclaimed that there was a great war to be fought, as he had learned from the Chronorium. The crews banded together and went on their way, traveling to Alpha Omega, also known as Camp Edward. When they arrived, they fought together to secure the elemental shard, which Nikolai said they would need for what he knew was coming next. Once the shard was secured, Maxis, who was still in the house at that point with Dr. Monty, made a last-ditch effort to save the children by teleporting them over to meet up with Primus and Ultimus in Camp Edward. Moments after he did so, he was killed by Monty, leaving Samantha fatherless and Eddie without the father figure who in another life had helped raise him after the deaths of his parents. It was the first time that Monty had revealed his true intentions and true motivation, and with this new crew formed of Primus, Ultimus, Samantha, and Eddie, they all opted to travel to the forest to enjoy one last night of celebration before they went on to meet their destinies face on. However, as we know from TOTEN, there was still work to be done before the story could truly come to a close, and that's where Victis came in. Awoken from their slumber in cryostasis in Blood of the Dead, they traveled to the Group 935 research facility in Siberia, where TAG takes place. The Easter egg on the map forced Victis to create the Agarthan device, a hitherto unmentioned combination of A, the elemental shard, B, Apothecon blood, and C, the seal of duality. Once this device was constructed, their mission, seemingly, was finally complete.
Hello? Richtofen? Has something gone wrong? We did everything you asked! You haven't forgotten about us, have you?
Victis were surprised, though, when they'd done it, that they weren't saved with yet another of Richtofen's portals after they finished undertaking his orders. They had worked as a team, tirelessly throughout the events of the story, to do what was asked of them. And now they were left without guidance for the first time in years? Meanwhile, the cutscene returns to the forest.
No, Sammy. I haven't forgotten about you.
It is time, Richtofen. The multiverse must come to an end.
The paradox must be resolved. At least, it will be quick.
The true meaning of Zombie Richtofan's appearance here is subject to debate. An argument could absolutely be made that because it was Zombie Richtofan's life force which filled the empty shell of Ultimus Richtofan's body back on Classified, it was only a matter of time before he turned back again and began to show signs of zombification, almost like a transplant being rejected by its new host. Maxis's eternal curse, carried all the way over from the buried endgame, also plays a part here too. Perhaps the weakened state of Ultimus Richtofan meant that the poison present in the drinks Nikolai had been serving in the forest affected him faster than all of the others, and when he died first, he came back as Zombie Richtofan exactly as Maxis had cursed him perpetually to do. There is, of course, also a chance that once Zombie Richtofan entered his Ultimus body in Classified, he actually gained the ability to switch roles between one and the other, allowing him to present as either his zombie self or his regular human self. There may also be some contribution here to how he communicates with Stuhlinger and the rest of Victis through Stuhlinger. Whatever the case, I don't actually think it makes too much of a difference for the story, and it certainly doesn't affect the ending in my opinion. What comes next is much more important. With the Agarthan device secured, Nikolai's first move is to destroy the summoning key. The key is one of the oldest and most powerful artifacts in all creation, and the act of destroying it marks the first move in the real plan which Nikolai read about in the Chronorium. We, up to this point, thought that we were going in one direction, and Nikolai the whole time had another direction firmly in his head. By destroying the key, and remember we're in a branch now from the Black Ops 3 timeline, so we're no longer in a cycle, he also destroyed the Shadow Man, as well as the innocent souls of his friends who were captured in Der Eisen and Zetsebo. More importantly though, the destruction of the key caused the universe itself, in fact the multiverse, to begin to unravel. We're beginning to learn just how broad Nikolai's plan is at this point, and that continues in the next part of the cutscene, which I'll let run for a little longer.
What are you talking about? We found the Agarthan device!
I know. And I'm so sorry.
Me too, Richthofen. We fought for what we wanted. We got more than we deserved. All the chapters of our lives, good and bad. Even if there was no witness, even if no one cared to see. It still happened. Somewhere. We fought the Great War over and over, but victory could never be ours. We were always doomed to fail. Monty told us the truth. Our journey is the very reason this madness exists. We are the ones who fractured the universe. This is the truth the Chronorium showed me. The truth Richthofen could no longer face. When we are gone, so too is everything that spewed forth from the Aether. Element 115, the Apothecaries, even Monty himself. All of it will be banished to where it belongs. The Dark Aether. We should not be here. Our time has passed.
Across those last couple of moments, you just watched every other member of Primus and Ultimus die at the hands of Nikolai. He realized when he read the Chronorium that there was only one way that things could truly improve. There was only one way that the children, the innocents, could truly be safe. To understand why this is, we need to look at Primus and Ultimus not as their individual incarnations, but as four characters who appear through time and space across the multiverse, no matter what. They are a constant across both time and space, and as their stories kept unfolding over and over again, the corruption of the dark ether reached more and more of the multiverse. Their paths in life, no matter where they were inherently linked to that dark ether, and when Nikolai reads the Chronorium, he realizes that this is why he needs to take charge. This is a burden that Richtofen is simply not strong enough to bear, no matter how hard he has tried to do the right thing and save the people around him and save his friends. He was not strong enough to accept the fact that it would be the sacrifice of not just him, but all of his friends, his only friends, that would actually bring things to a close for good. This realization was only made by Richtofen when interacting with Pablo Marinus in the Great War. He realized after being teleported back by Dr. Monty in that endless cycle that things were never going to end. He would simply be born one day in the late 1800s, he would go forth towards the Great War, he would meet those other characters, go through the arc of Black Ops 3, and then get to Revelations and get teleported back. As Pablo says about Richtofen, for all his efforts, he had only fulfilled the prophecy of the cycle. It was him and Dr. Monty who forged the endless loop. The fight between Monty and the Shadow Man, the Keepers and the Apothicons, that was one battle, right? That was one fight. But it was a fight within the confines of this endless cycle. And as Pablo tells us in a really interesting radio, Richtofen began to understand the fact that there was more to life than just that never-ending war.
This doctor, he tells me one more thing. He tells me he realizes that Dr. Monty is not inherently evil. Dr. Monty, he says, is trying to save the multiverse the safest way he knows how. By forcing us into this cycle, our story will never end. But also, his universe and his existence will be guaranteed. I can't blame him, he says. Dr. Monty is much like you and me. He just wants to survive. He doesn't want to risk his own annihilation. I tell him, well, if we are doomed to meet here again and again until the end of existence, perhaps there is something we can do to change that. He looks at me with a smile and says, I think you are right, old friend.
Richtofen's realization made during that radio is what set the wheels in motion for Blood of the Dead, and finally we get back to this cutscene and where we stand right now with the multiverse unraveling. It's only once the other members of Primus and all of Ultimus are dead that Nikolai can act on the final aspect of his plan. He had brought the crew together in the forest, yes, to celebrate the fact that they were about to go and meet their destinies, but what he really wanted to get out of them was a hopeful look towards the future, a light in the darkness, telling him what they wanted in life, what they truly desired, what their souls were reaching out for, but that their lives would simply not allow them to get to.
You have spoken many times of a war, Nikolai. A great war.
Yeah, a war unlike any we have ever seen.
Oh, are you going to tell them everything, Nikolai? The Apothicons, the Keepers, the Shadow Man, the Dark Aether, Monty.
Shadow Man? The Apotha what's? What's he talking about, Nikolai?
They are legends contained in the book, the Chronorium. Tales of demons and angels commanded by the forces of light and darkness.
That does not sound unlike any war we have ever faced. Demons and angels, light and darkness, the big stuff. Who was who? Which was which? Do you know that, Nikolai?
Monty and Shadow Man were more similar than you know, Richtofen. Both were corrupted by the Dark Aether. One by his own ambition, the other desperately trying to save his friend. Do you remember when I asked you what you really want?
We remember. But why do you ask this now?
Because the Great War No. The greatest war is the one we fight against ourselves.
And so, with those celebrations complete, he finally felt able to snuff out all of their lives, to finish their arcs for good, and that's when this happens.
But for all the pain and torment we have endured together, as we leave this life behind, it is my hope that you know one thing beyond any doubt.
Look away, Eddie.
You are more than just my allies, my brothers in arms. You were my friends.
It finally falls on Samantha. She and Eddie are the only two remaining characters at this point, and Samantha's the older one, despite the fact that Eddie's much taller in that weird end cutscene a little bit when they're walking. So Samantha takes the weapon, and as is a poetic end, I think, for the zombie's story, she, as just a child, has to finally end the arc of our four heroes. And she does. The last thing we see is Samantha and Eddie walking towards the light. This is largely symbolic. It's not necessarily a literal thing to say that everything in the universe kind of got erased and then they walked towards an actual light and things got good again. It's more trying to convey that artistically, I think. The sequence here tells us what the characters told Primus Nikolai that they wanted for the rest of their lives. It's their final hopeful moment, their final light in the darkness before their story came to a close. And it's a way of Treyarch honoring each of their own individual personalities in a way that was very brief, but hopefully for you guys, very touching. The more important thing to consider here, though, I think, is what's actually going to happen to Samantha and Eddie. Well, it seems like, as the story has been building to for many years now, Samantha and Eddie are two innocent souls who are uncorrupted by everything else that is happening in the universe. We even had story trailers specifically referring to this back during Black Ops 3 and even during Origins in Black Ops 2. There's so much information out there focused on the fact that the child must be protected at all costs. I mean, that was said, I think, verbatim in The Giant. It's been there in front of our eyes. And now the decision has been made that the only way to prevent further perpetuation of this endless war between Keepers and Apothicons, the only way to resolve the duality of Primus and Ultimus, and the Shadowman and Monty, and Richtofen and Maxis, and all of these interwoven, connected pairs in the zombie story, dark and light. It's been a clear theme for a while now. The only way is to completely erase all of it from the picture and start afresh. And Samantha and Eddie are the only two people, uncorrupted by everything else, as children, that have the ability to do that. Now, I've seen a lot of people saying, why didn't they just go and fight the Great War against Monty and then beat Monty and win and be done with it? But it's the act of even progressing, of existing, of facilitating any kind of interaction with those four, with the Aether and the Apothicons, and all of the history that is wrapped up with those characters that continues things moving in that exact same direction eternally. It's almost like Craig Houston and the rest of the Treyarch writing team were trying to basically tell us that the only way we could move zombies forward as a mode, the only way that we could find somewhere new that would really be somewhere new would be if we left the old behind. And just by fighting the same old Great War over and over again and beating the same old villains that were inspired by that same dark ether, that same force, that same corruption, things would never have gone anywhere, man. We would have been playing the same characters in different places over and over again. And this is a chance and an opportunity and an attempt to craft something that in the future will actually be a fresh start. So is the story over? Yes. In theory, there shouldn't be any zombies anymore. 115 is gone. The Keepers, the Apothicons, all of that has been banished to the space below creation. It simply doesn't exist anymore in the real world. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a real world anymore as well. There is still an Earth, and Samantha and Eddie will still have lives. It's just that they are given a chance here to experience life, not as this twisted war of fate that's been unfolding in the zombie storyline for the last 10 years. That isn't to say that they might find happiness. That isn't to say that they might survive till they are late in their lives and die of old age and have been fulfilled and successful and at peace with everything that's gone on. But they have a chance to be normal. And that's what all of this fighting has been for. It's exactly that chance to be normal that the characters all discuss in that final sequence. Their dreams of what they would have done had they not been wrapped up in all of this complete tornado of chaos. And it's their sacrifice that allows Samantha and Eddie that peace. The zombie story, honestly, couldn't really have ended any other way. There isn't really a way where they could have tied absolutely everything together and done so in a way that didn't end things. And I think that despite the fact that personally, I'm not a huge fan of the delivery, I'm not a huge fan of the end cutscene itself in terms of the artistic style, of course. I think that there's a lot of spreading out that could have been done of the distribution of this information instead of piling so much of it into one map. I do think that the story needed to go here. And if we look at it specifically through the lens of the narrative only, I think that I'm at peace with what happened. And I'm glad that our characters were finally able to find resolution. The paradoxes are resolved, the loops are closed, and the story is over. For now. That's going to wrap this video up from me. If you have any further questions, let me know in the comments down below. Like I said, I'll be doing a whole video on the full story of this map, and then maybe if you guys ask nicely, we'll do a full story recap at some point. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.